along the Platte River. We had 34,000. What's the four-cylinder one?
403 or 283, 336.
336. 34,000 336 engines along the Platte River. In western Kansas, when I first started working that area, an 800 couldn't handle the depth that they down around 400 feet for water. And I got the biggest sale in my whole career when the dealer in Janssen, Kansas called me up and says, "Hey Jim, come on out here next week. I want to show you, give you something." And I said, "Okay." So I went out there and I said, "What's the deal?" "Well, sit down." And he said, "We just delivered in the last 3 weeks 110 HD 800 engines, and I want to give you a check for them." That's the biggest check I ever got, $375,000 odd dollars. And you never had any service problems with the power units? No. Then they finally ran out of horsepower, so they put two together. And then finally they got the water lever dropped. We had to get out of the power unit business in that big irrigation area because we just didn't have horsepower. Even with two HD 800s put together, we couldn't handle the need for power to get water at that depth.
That's kind of scary, really, isn't it?
Pardon?
It's kind of scary, the water table is dropping
Yeah,
down.
you bet.
I had heard something about the oil field people, that if you were a Moline dealer, like in Texas, where there was a lot of oil activity,
Yeah.
the oil people wouldn't deal with an ag dealer. You had to set up a separate Moline dealership for oil field. Did you remember anything about that?
No,
Maybe it was
I
a
worked
certain
Texas
particular
for the last
area.
20 years.
Okay. I had heard that story, that they wanted a
reason we got-
dedicated dealership for them, and that was that.
The reason we lost the smaller engine up in Nebraska and eastern Kansas and those areas is the electric company just went out and almost gave them a electric motor and hardly charged them for the electricity
Sure.
just to get the business. And we couldn't imagine, we couldn't meet that.
If you
I was
drive
gonna-
down I-80 today, you'll still see Moline engines sitting out there running vehicles.
Oh, yeah.
Today. They're still running.
I was gonna, you were talking about the end of the unis, and I wasn't on the ball at the time, but I'd been to a sale, and there was would have been a brown mule at the transition time to the new idea. And it still had the Moline colors, but it had new idea stickers on it.
Yes.
And I didn't think anything about it at the time, and now later I'm like, should have probably bought that maybe, but
Was it 700?
I couldn't tell you.
We did, there was some that early on,
Yeah.
and then there was only, I don't know how many would turn gray
Right.
at the very end at Hopkins, but we did, there's some brown mules with the new idea.
Yep. That was the only thing that was
Because that's
different
what
about
we
it.
had,
Everything else was, but except for the decals, that was it.
yeah, we put those on, we, at the end, when we were testing them out and making sure RPM and everything was right, we put on the serial numbers on the unis.
So to piggyback on his question, a couple of years ago, I bought a uni from Wes Anderson and sold it to a collector in Michigan a little while later, because with my background, I got so many projects I can realistically do. And that was the highest serial number we know of the Minneapolis-Moline Brown Mule at number 1886. And I wrote about that in Prairie Gold Rush, so you might have seen it there. And with Ken's research, is there any known surviving documentation showing the transfer of units from Minneapolis-Moline to New Idea? And the reason I ask is because there are known New Idea unis, 700s, with a New Idea serial number with a lower number engine than the unit that I had. So were they, I know everything didn't always come off consecutive serial number, but do we have, do any of you guys happen to have at home anything like that that can help that research to establish that for sure?
Well, when we got done, every day we'd have the serial numbers that we wrote down, that we went through, that we turn in. But the last of them, they still made the engine at 260, and then they shipped it to Coldwater instead of
Right, they
bringing
continue to
it
make
to
extra
Hopkins.
engines for them.
And I guess I don't,
And then the same question to ask.
I do know some that are, my neighbor has a gray one. It's a new idea with the old engines in it. But and I had an opportunity down by Belle Plaine, to buy that, and I screwed it up. I bought the one thing from the guy, and he had a picker sheller and a husker and a combine, all on carriages yet, and the hoist, and the gray mule that was new idea but built by Minneapolis-Moline.
And then related to that, with the White divesting of assets, the other thing I haven't been able to find documentation of is we know that White sold the haying technology, the hay baler line, to Heston. But I cannot find any documentation of any sort indicating that the 4500, I believe it's the Heston 4500 baler, is an Oliver 720 with different timber. And likewise, when they developed, or is that which number am I confusing, their inline baler, 4600, when they came out, you can tell looking at it, it's designed on the Minneapolis-Moline straight through the Bailmaster 760, but there's got to be documentation, paperwork of that sale from White Corporate, or from the Oliver franchise to Heston.
The only place I could think that would have been was in the administration building across the road, but I know that they had to buy the patent rights to the inline baler, as did the international to the rotary baler from the model Scheller, or 1210 or whatever the one, back when. But the patent office, I would think, would be a place to look in, because, or even Heston, if
And I've called Heston on corporate, and I haven't been able to raise anybody out there that's knowledgeable enough that far back to realize it. The answer I got was a guy, I've been an engineer for 25 years, and we invented that in the 70s. And I go, sorry, you didn't.
That's like the Paulson loader on my 500, and Paulson the backhoe. Paulson Company in Clear Lake, Minnesota, or Big Lake, was sold to Paulson in what's the first place out of Minneapolis called?
Richfield?
No, going on 94. It's where 101 comes up.
Rogers?
Rogers, Paulson and Rogers, and I called a couple of years ago to see if they had parts, and the guy I talked to then had some knowledge of the sale and so on, and said they probably had some parts. But when I called, and he was going to get back to me, never did. But when I called, a few months ago, they didn't know anything about it. There wasn't anybody that had anything. So,
Martin, I wonder, like the engines you're talking about, if maybe they were warehoused or earmarked for something else, and that fell through.
Right.
Well, we got this room full of engines, okay, let's just ship them.
Well,
That's about the only thing I could
Or
think of.
the other question, I've been told the theory is that, just to pick a number out of a hat, maybe they had 100 brown mules on hand, and New Idea wanted 50 right now to start, so they took the serial plate off, put a New Idea on, put the New Idea decals, but I've never found anything to prove or disprove that theory.
tell you what, I think there is one or two times that we did that on the brown when it got to the. But the engines, the engine numbers would be really different, because I remember one time we got 5 engines and we had so many to put out, and that's all, and then we had to shut the line down because he didn't have any more engines, and we had to wait for a week or two from Lake Street to get the engines in. So the engines weren't consecutive necessarily. And sometimes I know when I was putting tags on the G4s and the combines and so on out by the paint shop, they didn't bring me down consecutive numbers because I usually kept a copy on a clipboard of the ones I had gotten through already so that I could start from there. But sometimes the tags that they had stamped out weren't the same. I mean, there wasn't consecutive, so it's like you said, it's a crapshoot.
And then the third question
Moline
I
built
had,
engines in batches. They wouldn't build 5 engines.
Right, no,
They
they didn't.
would build probably at least 50 of one engine if they were set up to build it. In many cases, 100 or, and tractors, they typically like batches of 250. But they didn't always get to do that, of course.
then the third.
And the engines were made separate, could be ahead. They wanted to have them stockpiled for when they needed them in a tractor or a uni. And they were not put in a warehouse consecutively. The last one you put in, the highest serial number, when Hopkins called 1 or 10 engines, that's the first, they'd get the highest number.
Yeah, the first ones they
The last in would be the first out.
First out, right.
And
Open the
so
door and
that's
take the
why
first one.
Moline tractor engines and engine and rear or tractor do not have the same serial number. In fact, it may have happened early in some of the batches,
Coincidentally.
Well,
but it was your odds were not very good at getting the same serial number on both the engine and tractor.
And
It
then
was
my
the
other
same,
question-
it was the same as when we got done with the combines or everything at Hopkins. If they didn't have an order for them, if they didn't go up on the shipping dock and get on the flatbed or on the pickup truck, on the truck, they go out to the boneyard. And then they'd put them in and when they went out to get them, when they had an order, they'd take the last one, which would have been, or the first one, which would have been the last one out there, so the others are still way in the back.
And there's photographs of literally hundreds of engines lined up like that.
At one time, there was a lot of stuff back there in 62 or 63, because
And then the other
Lots of
question
stuff.
I had, to go back to when we were on the A4T with the last A4Ts, and I posed the question to Craig Goldrush 4 or 5 years ago, was the Australian connection. The A4Ts that went to Australia, I have publications from over there. The new A4T introduced in April of 1974. So that's over 2 years after production ended here.
Martin Johnson had an article.
Yep, that's me.
no,
Yep.
you,
Yep, that's me.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and that's why I asked, I've never
Well,
got any
you
feedback on
showed
that
that
too.
there was apparently some
Yep.
shipped, and you had literature showing the,
Right, and they put the badging on them like the white trucks, so they
Yeah.
had aluminum medallions. And my question has always been, and then it ties in with the Oliver versions of the 50 series Moline sent to South Africa and Australia. Were they for certain the same serial number blocks? Because previously Moline did specific serial numbers for the Spanish tractors and difference, or could they possibly be additional tractors to what we know of in this country?
it's possible, any of the above.
So I was real curious, 'cause like those the Olivers to South Africa, they all, the pictures I've seen, they all had the external mounted air cleaner, and they had Massey Ferguson front weights, they were set up, real interesting compared to anything in this country, which just picked my brain, so, with you guys being there, if you ever recall, or if anybody stumbles into any documentation to support or anything, we'd love to.
I met some people from South Africa when I was working in the marketing side there in 73, but I never heard anyone say anything about Australia.
Okay.
And they had a separate international division, and I heard them talk about the Sami tractors and the Landini combine, I think it was in Italy, but I never ever heard any comment made about Australia.
Okay.
So that was, information was new
The
to
one
me.
South African ad, I remember, is a picture of an A4, a 2655, because they're all in Oliver paint. I believe it's in Kevin, I think you remember this ad, it's an 1865 and a 2055?
Yes.
And which is it, the 18 or the 20? There's supposedly 7 were made in Oliver from the numbers that I think Brian Gagne has pulled out of the records here. And 2 or 3 of them are known in South Africa, and of course we don't know them all here. So it just that low production number really makes my mind spin as to did they possibly do a separate serial number block for those?
When Lake Street closed down, didn't they build a lot of extra parts if Charles City had to assemble some tractors such as A4Ts, or am I?
Well, the A4Ts were assembled.
There was nothing extra to be shipped down to be assembled here? if
No,
it was
there was
ordered
no
for-
tractors assembled. They were painted, there were some of them painted here. And I don't know when it came to the engines later, when they decided to build the engine here, I don't know if they shipped some inventory of parts down here. I know that they shipped machine tools. I don't know whether they used them all and the tooling, but they shipped some stuff down here. But I don't know what was, I can't tell you.
That was probably
Before
just,
my time.
yeah, something that maybe I'm
Yeah,
confused
that was
about.
done in
'cause,
'72.
you know,
And I had one piece of correspondence I came across, it listed all the tires that they had at Lake Street, that, near at the end of production, and how many they were gonna use up on the line, how to try to use them up. And then the ones that weren't, they supposedly shipped the tires, they had new tires up there. You had to keep an inventory of tires of different sizes, because every farmer or dealer wanted something different, or different combination. Some dealers specified Goodyear or Firestone rears, for example, although
Yeah.
they did claim they wouldn't do it, but it happened. And the front and rears, some dealers, a big deal, the front and rear had to be the same company.
yeah.
Other dealers didn't, and farmers didn't care.
And then we're not talking about big quantity here, but a lot of the 800 installations that the dealers did, the 504s were shipped back, weren't they?
Yes.
And so that could throw a serial number dilemma into somebody as far as their serial number being,
But that, I would assume those serial numbers were back in production,
okay.
1350s or A4Ts.
But, I mean,
One thing that was up here a couple weeks ago, Mary Ann had that G1350, or no, 2255, which was the Moline version of the G1350. I always thought there had only been a very limited number built, like less than 50. Well, there's build sheets, or those spreadsheets show 250 in the serial numbers form. I didn't realize, had no idea there was that many out there.
This is which tractor?
the G1350 would have been
The 2255.
2155.
2155.
2155.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, before,
Yeah.
not the cat.
Yeah, right, you're right.
yeah,
2155.
yeah,
What
yeah.
you talking about? 2155.
But rather than, I thought there was less than 50, and it looks like there was 250.
So then.
And that had never shown up in any of the Moline listings.
You know, we always figure our G1350 production was around 325 diesels
Yeah.
and a little over 100 LPs, so that number could be skewed now because of what you're saying?
Mhm.
Okay.
How many red, white, and blues and red, white, and blacks? Is there a way they could?
Brian Gagne is your source on that. I don't know. He has counted. He's been through all those build sheets. And I don't see him,
He's not here right now.
he's out,
Yep, he was here earlier.
yeah.
When we got
I
here.
talked to him this morning. So.
You know how many ours are built?
How many-
Ours?
Cab.
Oh, the cab. Some of you people have a better idea than I do on
That's
that.
kind of hard to tell because a lot of times the farmer wouldn't take the cabs. And the dealers ended up having them stuck on the lots. And then later during the war, they made the farmers take the cabs like they wanted the tractors. And then that's kind of skewed that up a whole bunch, didn't it? I mean,
I'm thinking I heard at one time there was 300, but I don't, that's not I'm not very confident of that number.
Same number as somebody else told.
Pardon?
Somebody else told me 300. That might be right.
Yes.
I had a question on a 1355 propane. I ran across one here a while back that you were talking earlier that you could order these tractors with the 3-speeds, the 50 series for Delonte P tractors or whatever. I found a 1355 that's a Wheatland propane that must have been ordered with a straight 6-speed. It doesn't have the 3-speed, but it has the housing with no machining on it for the plumbing. It's just bare housing with a shaft through it, and it's a factory piece that never was made for a 3-speed. It was just a blank,
This is in which
a
tractor?
1355 propane.
That's just the way they made them. You had to keep
An
them all
Oliver
run out
tractor?
on the ground.
Oliver, was it yellow or green?
No, it's yellow. It's 1355, 73 propane, white stripe. It's just-
1355s, yeah, you could get without the over-under.
You could,
Yeah.
okay. I've never
That's
seen one.
maybe the only one they built, I don't know. Because that was one of the big features that farmers really liked.
I know, I was just curious why they would have never ordered it with the 3-speed, you know, and for the special order.
Cost,
Probably $2,500 less.
And mind you, it was a Wheatland to boot,
yeah.
which,
Where out there, the fence rows are long ways apart. You're not turning very
No
often.
variable load, be the same load all day long,
like I said, I've never seen one, and that was the first one I ever run across, and I thought maybe it was just a gutted, 3-speed, and someone put a straight shaft in, but the housing has none of the plumbing for a 3-speed. It's a factory
Yeah.
piece, which kind of surprised me.
I've got a 955 like that. And there's a 105 down there like that.
Really? So they did it even in the white.
105 you got like that.
I'm pretty sure there's one down there in the valley. I know the 955 is still running.
Another question, you're talking about combines earlier. I realized over the years the Minneapolis-Moline corn shellers were rotary machines, actually. And out of North Platte, Nebraska, here a while back, I was out at the Historical Society, and they have a couple of Minneapolis-Moline, I don't know if they're unis or combines, but they are rotary machines. So did Minneapolis-Moline actually have the first rotary combine out there?
They had the first rotary, actually, the uni picker sheller of the Model E is a 250 corn head on a Model E corn sheller.
Okay.
And that's that rotary patent had to be bought by International, because it, from White or Agco.
White had that rotary.
Yeah, White had,
Well, yeah, but White bought,
White had that big rotary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they
That
came
was
out
years
after
later.
the
that was
International.
afterwards. The
Yeah.
first rotary was,
White did
was
get
the
a
corn
number of
shellers.
patents on their rotary.
Yeah, it was a
And I think Deere is still paying patent on their rotary combines to Agco for something about the intake paddle arrangement on that they copied from what Big White Rotary had.
that's why Moline, you won't see, there's John Deere shellers, but most of the shellers you see are Moline because they were the most efficient and the cleanest, and they didn't crack the corn like
Well,
the others.
if you look at that Moline rotor in the corn shellers and that combine, and you look at it, and then look at one in like a white 9700, it just looks like the white 9700, just a giant version of that, to be honest with you, because it's got the impeller that pulls it in front and everything,
Yep.
just like the white combine does. So, I was just wondering if that's where White actually got it, was from owning Minneapolis-Moline and them rights.
The harvesting engineers of Moline were, when they sold out to White Motor, that
They left.
they were all, I don't know whether they fired or they left as their own.
So